What a horrible Christmas to have a Curse of the Moon. 2. Yes, it's another Bloodstained video on Christmas Day. Go figure. This is Bloodstained Curse of the Moon 2. I guess we couldn't come up with a better title. Anyway, released in 2020 for multiple platforms including today's subject matter, Nintendo Switch, Curse of the Moon is a sequel to the first Curse of the Moon game in which you still have the gameplay and pseudo-NES style of presentation and audio and all that. But in terms of narrative, this is kinda sorta its own thing. Again, I don't know, fresh new franchise, only 3 games, and what is a canon? It's a long tube that launches miserable balls of metal wrapped in death and despair, but anyway. Curse of the Moon has 2 difficulties. Casual, which is the easier, die as many times as you like romp in the park, and Veteran, which is the old school ladies and gentlemen's way of playing such games. I normally go Veteran, but I dabbled in Casual for a bit just to get a feel, and didn't feel like going through another romp, so this is what you're stuck with footage-wise. Besides, you're supposed to beat this game several times to unlock a bunch of story arcs and modes and whatevers, because nothing can be simple and straightforward like the good old days this shit is trying to emulate. Everything has to be beat the game to unlock hard mode, beat the game while killing allies to unlock nightmare mode, beat the game while standing on your head on a crickety wooden chair while balancing a stack of plates on the tip of each elbow and pissing a consistent stream up into the air without actually touching the ceiling to unlock the ultra secret erotic judgment mode that only 3 people in the world have actually played or seen or something. That's where you get to do the checkpoint. Anyway, if you've played Curse of the Moon 1, then Curse of the Moon 2 is relatively familiar territory. You start a new game in control of the demon hunter Zangetsu, who plays more or less as he did in the previous game. He has a sword for a main weapon, he has the same set of sub-weapons, his jumps are still stiff, and he can only hop on stairs but not off. As you progress through the games, other characters will join the fray. 3 new faces in fact. Dominique, who has a spear that can strike upwards and downwards, along with some unique sub-weapons like a plant that spouts hearts to restore health. There's Robert, who has a gun and thus has the most reach with his attacks, but he also has the lowest HP. Finally, there's Hachi, a dog in a mech. He has no sub-weapons, but he can fly for a bit, go into a burning mode that renders him invincible for a short while, and he can smash through weak floors as well as shatter spike beds, useful for reaching alternate paths. Later modes will also feature your allies from the previous game who play as they did in that game. There's a purpose to doing the 3 episodes, or 4 technically, because episode 1 is obviously the first quest of the game, episode 2 is the second quest minus 1 character, and depending on how you beat this thing, you'll either play episode 3 or another episode that trades in your new allies for your old ones. But eventually, all this leads to episode 3 where you're collecting pieces for a spaceship that will fly you to the moon in the game's true final stage. That is assuming you're willing to stomach playing through the same 7 or 8 stages over and over and over again, which I will admit started to be a bit of a chore after a while. Curse of the Moon 2 is to Curse of the Moon 1 what Mega Man 10 was to Mega Man 9, in that it is the comfortable follow-up that sticks with what worked in the first game and adds a bit more stuff to say that they added a bit more stuff, then ramps up the overall difficulty somewhat so it doesn't feel like a total throwaway effort. That's not to say that this second go-around is a half-hearted effort, because it really isn't. The 9-ish stages you're traversing are well-crafted, almost devious little death traps that challenges those who breezed through the first game with some new ideas tossed in for good measure, as well as plenty of teases for possible alternate paths that require allies that will take a good while to join your path. The new allies that you have to play with in this game are somewhat distinct from each other, bringing different tools to your arsenal that can be useful in different ways. But you could eventually reach a point where you recruit your old allies from the previous game and they're also just as useful. Now, whether you can actually stomach playing through the same set of stages over and over again to see everything that the game has to offer is another story entirely, but then again, that was also a concern with the first game as well, so really it depends on the individual player. Control once again remains spot on, simple, tight, responsive, not much change there. The one major addition is that a second player can join the fray as one of the other characters you've recruited, so you can have some cool 2-player action on hand if you want to do that. Curse of the Moon 2 once again sports the pseudo-NES style of pixel art. Looks like something that could fit onto an NES card, but hypercharged with extra colors and visual effects that otherwise would not have been possible on the old hardware. There are some recycled bits and certain characters returning and being reused, but otherwise, it's a new looking game with some nice looking art and some creative effects here and there. At this point, there's not a whole lot I could say about this. This sort of pseudo-NES retro-charged look doesn't quite wow me as it used to, if only because we've had one game too many done in this style, and as such, it's no longer special. But Curse of the Moon 2 remains a very nice looking game in this style, I will give it that much. And of course, with pseudo-NES style graphics, you have pseudo-NES style chiptunes and sound effects. The music here maintains that same energetic, sometimes moody or thematic tones of the previous game's soundtrack, and you've got a couple decent tunes here, though nothing that really stuck with me compared to the previous game's track. This is more like the B-Tracks collection of Curse of the Moon chiptunes, a couple good ones, but everything starts to blend together and it just starts to sound all the same, but that's just me though. Sound effects are, again, what they are. They're appropriately 8-bit sounding with some additional punch when needed, and thematically appropriate to the overall style. Overall, if you enjoyed Bloodstained Curse of the Moon, then Bloodstained Curse of the Moon 2 will also be to your liking, as it's more or less the same type of game with some new levels and some new players to play with, both in terms of new characters, as well as a new multiplayer component that ought to be a lot of fun. It's just largely a case of business as usual, and Curse of the Moon 2, while doing enough different things to not feel like a complete copy and paste, certainly feels like business as usual. Perfectly fine game, had a blast with this one, but I think I had my share, and here's hoping the next Bloodstained title, Curse of the Moon or otherwise, veers a little beyond its comfort zone and tries for something more unique. 3 games in, I think this series has more than earned that privilege. But we'll have to see what the future holds, I suppose. Merry Christmas, kids. Enjoy your holidays.